I'd rather create something that others criticise than create nothing and criticise others.
If you have high quality product behind the bar, it's like a weapon.
It's not about the figures, it's about who those figures are.
The Hospopreneurs Podcast.
I'm going to drink this beer.
Yeah, let's crack them.
With James Henderson.
Hello and welcome to episode 50 of the Hospopreneurs Podcast. This is a big episode. It's a milestone not only for the show at episode 50, but running an episode with Stone and Wood had been a personal objective of mine since early on in the program. Jamie Cook is an incredible man, and when we were down for the episode, he showed us the hospitality that Stone and Wood and Northern New South Wales are famous for. There's an absolute abundance of value in today's show and insights that we've never had before. So sit back and relax, or grab a pen and enjoy. Hello and welcome to the show, Jamie.
Thanks for having us, James.
No worries at all, no worries at all. As you know, the first question I like to ask is, what's your crazy hospitality story?
Back in about 1983, I was working in a pub in London, just near St James's Park, and 2 minutes before closing, the All Blacks walked in.
Yeah.
And
so they're going to have a couple of beers.
We were about to try and clear the pub, and they settled in for the night. And trying to get the All Blacks to finish up their pints at about 3/4 an hour after closing, trying to get them out, I just gave up, shut the pub, and joined them. So it was a lock-in for the night. It was a pretty good time.
Obviously, they're all nice blokes themselves, so they're not going to be scary, but they're scary-looking dudes. Obviously, they're big fellas.
Yeah, when you walk up to them and you're looking, eyeballing their belly button.
I know exactly what you're talking about. That's a cool, crazy little story. Thank you very much for sharing it.
Right.
The next question I like to really open the episode with is why you do what you do. So on a really macro level, what is it that inspires you about what you do?
Yeah, good question. I think probably the big thing for me is creativity and a love of beer, seeing people grow. One of the common things that the three of us that started the business weren't enjoying when we were in corporate life. There was an era where I worked in corporate life. Before that I was in small businesses, but was the confining nature of corporate life and sort of the political gamesmanship that gets played and the talent that gets lost and the creativity that gets lost along the way. And one of the things that drove us to start our own business was to be able to create something from scratch, whether it be a beer, a brand or a business. In the end of the day, building something is what we really get into, and beer is our thing. Yes. I've been in the beer game most of my working life. The other guys the same. So for us, beer is what we do. So we love it.
Yes.
So it's not really a job. It's just a passion, and it's something we love to see the team here now growing, and that's the people side of it. Is now we're able to sort of get out of their way because pretty much they're driving the thing, and it's great to see people grow as the business has grown.
Yes. How do you create that culture to foster that sort of community within the groups that you've designed, I suppose?
Yeah, good question. I mean, it comes down to what the purpose of the business is. You hear a lot about purpose these days in sort of business circles, but for us initially, the thinking was the three of us would quit corporate life and go and start our own brewery, and do it in Byron Bay. What a great place to do it. The piece though is when the team starts to grow and you've got people working for you, all of a sudden, when we quit working for the man and did our own thing, the last thing we wanted to do was become the man ourselves, and the people in our team all of a sudden coming and being slaves to our dream. So the realisation of that pretty early on was that we actually needed something that brought the whole team together and gave them some purpose, gave us all purpose. So it was around building that purpose, around creating and sustaining a sustainable brewing business that really just actively embraces, develops and adds value to its communities. And that's what gets people up out of bed every morning and come to work. So adding value and embracing those communities is a key piece of it.
That's interesting because I've been thinking about something similar myself. This is possibly another way to attack the same sort of problem is, do you create a community or a culture independently of yourself, or being a founder, do you invest part of yourself in that creation of the community? And then do you look for people who fit with that, or do you ask those people what they want and let it mold to what they do?
I mean, that's an interesting one. Certainly, to start with, the business has to have, the founder's values have to, I mean, at the end of the day, I think the great thing about strong businesses is they're a reflection of not just the brand but the business's values and the people within it. So if you get that direct alignment between what your brand is saying out there, what the business's values are, and the people within it all sharing those same values, it makes it a very strong, authentic, real thing. So certainly from day one, the founders have a set of values that we instilled in the business, and we want to be right for what we wanted to create. And then as people joined, there's certainly a filter. That, the people we've brought into the business certainly certainly we want them to fit culturally with what we're doing. But at the end of the day, the culture, as you add more people, culture is just the outcome of everybody's input.
Yes.
So it does more for little, but certainly once you build a culture that's relatively strong, it's not going to go off the rails, because if someone comes in who's trying to push it somewhere but doesn't want to go, they get squeezed out.
Yeah.
That's just a strong culture at work.
Where's the line? Obviously, earlier on when you're developing it, the people who get on board have more influence over the development of that culture, that growth of that. It's almost like a tree, and you're building that tree into, it's building in this direction. It's harder to move it, as you said. It becomes more ingrained or sets more. As being someone who controls it, where's the line? Do you go, no, look, my vision is correct, and you have to be stubborn sometimes and go, look, this is the way it is? And then also listening to what they have to say and being humble and thinking maybe what I thought was right wasn't right.
Yeah, well, I think it goes back to the very first realisation. We said we've got a team of people here and they need to create that purpose. That came out of the team, not the founders. That came out of the whole team. All 14 of us were there at the time.
Yeah.
So we built that and we reinforced the values at that time. And from that moment on, there's been a transition. The team, as they've grown, have taken more and more off our hands and have developed the culture, but also grown with the business. And we're in a transition phase now. We've got very strong leaders in the business that pretty much run the day-to-day. We don't have to get that involved in operational stuff. The stone and wood business is going strongly. We've got a few other things on the side that sort of are our little playthings, if you like, that we're developing and creating alongside stone and wood. The leadership team and the overall team can bring stone and wood to life every day. It's not something we have to worry about.
You mentioned there, even with the little playthings, I like the way that you put it as well. They also complement what you're doing, don't they? And they can be other avenues to generate business too.
Yeah, certainly not. I mean, part of it's a bit of passion and a bit of personal pent up creativity. That because stone and wood, we've been quite pure about how we've built that business, and we're not rigid about it, but we certainly have some fairly strong guidelines around what stone and wood is and what it does and doesn't do from a beer perspective or a branding perspective. And that's meant that there's been a lot of ideas over the years that have been left sitting on the shelf. For either those reasons or the fact that we've been growing so fast, we haven't had to need to pull those levers for extra growth. The stone and wood brand's been growing itself.
Yes.
So when we've had the opportunity in the last few years is to actually, let's start planting a few other acorns around the place, and some of them might grow into bigger trees over time.
Yeah.
But they're fulfilling creative opportunities and ideas we've had that are differentiated from what stone and wood's about. Trying not to stuff the duck, so to speak, and jam a whole bunch of ideas that don't quite fit into what stone and wood's about is probably a very strong part of what we've done, is kept stone and wood very pure.
My next question for you, Jamie, is the very first one. When this is ages before I even knew we were going to do an interview, someone said to me they wanted to know about stone and wood. This is just someone that I'd met when I told them about the show. They said, if you ever get to interview Stone and Wood or someone from Stone and Wood, and I've got an amazing guest from Stone and Wood today, has the hop profile changed at all since building the business?
In what?
In the
Pacific
Let's
Ale?
go with the Pacific Ale. It's the...
Yeah, look, we get that a lot.
Ale.
Has Pacific Ale changed? And to tell you the truth, it's been the same recipe from day one.
Yep.
What is changing is people's palates and people's sophistication around flavour, and we see that all the time. People come in, their first 10 years ago when they were first trying a draft ale, as it was called back then, their neck would just about snap off because of that unexpected hop aromatic. Firstly, the scale of it, but also it was a aroma they weren't used to relating to beer. So that used to startle people. But over time, people got used to that, and then people understood that sort of flavour, and then they've moved on to other styles of beer and other flavours. So, they might have matured their palates and built other expectations around flavour, but the beer's the same beer. Same beer.
That's good to know. And there's another little question I'm going to get into today. We've had a lot of audience questions just online, emails as well, and that I want to put to you a little bit later on in the episode. But I'd really love to ask how you navigate the temptation to add adjuncts and other things to the product as the business has grown and cut those corners. Obviously, you guys are doing incredibly well as a business, and there's always this pull or like push-pull between maintaining a very local culture, which you guys have down here, and then versus this like scalable mentality. How can we make a scalable business? It seems to be in the public domain that it's harder to scale authenticity, it's scale being genuine, scale being local. How do you guys navigate that?
I think you've got to stay true to who you are, and what got you to where you are today. And at the end of the day, the quality of beer has been paramount to us from day one. So we've stayed true to that. There's no need to add other things to cut costs. I won't step away from it. The business is a very profitable business, and there's no need to cut costs. At the end of the day, why would you do that to something that's creating the value for everybody anyway? Mm-hmm. Just like not training your people or whatever. At the end of the day, you've got to add value to those things that are adding value to everybody.
Yes.
So you've got to keep working away at building value for all of your stakeholders. So quality is a big part of that. The beers only get better every year because we invest more in quality, whether it's more people in the lab, more equipment, more analysis we do, all those sort of things. It improves the beer. It's not there to reduce the quality of it or make it cheaper. It's actually to improve the quality that we're making and the consistency of it.
So what is it that you, and it's very hard to boil this down to even one thing, so I'd love more than one thing for the answer, but what do you believe the success has been behind building such a powerful brand?
Yeah, good question. I can give you more than one thing.
I would love more than one thing. One's way too simple for this answer.
I think there's a number of things. People normally ask me this, around how we've got to where we are today. The first one is certainly the beer. We've had a very good quality beer that was, at the time, differentiated from what was in the marketplace. Hit a sweet spot between something that was differentiated enough for people who had an appreciation of flavour to appreciate, and those that didn't, it was approachable enough for them to jump on board with. So that certainly was the key. And quality of beer behind that, with all the other products we've rolled out, we've maintained that same degree of focus around quality and approachability. The second piece is probably the brand, and the brand being very relevant and maintaining its relevance. So being very true to ourselves, and that piece I talked before about the authenticity around the brand, the business and the people, getting that alignment right. So when someone scratches a Stone and Wood label, what they're seeing behind that is exactly what we're portraying ourselves as. Whether it's walking into the tasting room, hearing the guys behind the bar, engaging with you, or running into one of our guys on the road out in the marketplace, or at an event, seeing people, that same brand is coming to life in those connections. So that's a really important piece of being relevant and consistent with what we do as a brand. Then the third piece is people. The people, getting very good people who work together as a team. Every business is people effectively, and if you put them at number one in terms of looking after people, we would do a lot of that in terms of ensuring that the people who work for us are well looked after, whether it be remuneration, whether it be part of our employee share plan, the benefits that we have, lifestyle and sort of work-life blend that we try to work through with our team. So we don't talk about work-life balance at Stone and Wood, we talk about work-life blend. At the end of the day, most people who work here, nearly everyone loves beer and they love what they do. So you can't separate that from the rest of your life.
Yes.
It's not
your life.
It's not a part of your life, it's a part of your life. Yeah. And that's an important part of the lifestyle sort of work life we try to create here. The last piece is distribution. With all of those things in track, you don't get anywhere unless you've got good distribution, and building distribution is what builds brands. So if people can't buy your beer, they might love it, but if they can't find it anywhere, then you're not going to go anywhere. So building distribution in the right place has really been an important part of that, and a big piece for us has been maintaining our focus in our own backyard, that marketplace from Coffs Harbour to Noosa, and making sure that we can service that properly and effectively, and look after that market and stay relevant to that market locally. That's an important piece of it.
There are so many questions in there that I like to go down, but I can only ask one because it's my return question. I'd like to sort of hone in on maybe distribution there. obviously you've said that's an important part in the success of Stone and Wood so far. How do you believe a business should go about building distribution channels?
Depends on what type of business you're creating, but certainly in the sort of high-end alcoholic beverages market, your firm focus has to be on quality on-premise venues. That's where you've got to start building a brand. Mm-hmm. So building distribution in good venues that firstly are going to represent your brand the right way and are also slightly representative of your brand. So there's good alignment between the venue's brand and your brand. The people behind that venue support you and become your mouthpieces, and that's where people take a risk and try something new. It's a small investment to try something, and it creates brand relevance and brand experience. So on-premise, high-end on-premise is a big focus, and you've got to build a brand on-premise first, and then leverage that off-premise. So once people are starting to love it on-premise, they'll want to go and try and find it off-premise, and that's where you've got to be in the right places.
To do that, you have to motivate and inspire the venues themselves about the product to then be able to be telling patrons about the product, and then the patrons want to go out and buy the product. Something that I've thought about recently is, because you said you have to take it to good venues. I've been thinking recently, what is a good venue? I've worked in so many venues myself, that is a good venue somewhere that's profitable? Very profitable, very profitable, or is it somewhere that the industry respects? Because sometimes they're even different places, right? What's a good venue?
Yeah, good question. There's a mix there. There's certainly the first piece is that they've got to look after your product. So if they're not going to look after your product, then it's probably not worth us selling product there. So they have to be quality focused like us. Second piece, they have to have the right clientele who are going to appreciate your product. So if you're selling a slightly differentiated product and their client base, their customer base aren't going to appreciate that, then you're probably in the wrong spot. And the third piece, you talked about profitability. Yeah, I mean, in the end of the day, they've got to be able to pay the bills. So, obviously you've got to make sure that there's a good commercial relationship to back that up. And the last piece is they want to invest in education with their staff. We do a lot of work in the trade with our customer base around beer education, quality education, cellar training, all those sorts of things. We've actually started a sensory training program as well, sit people through, very similar to what we do with our sensory trials in the lab, taking people through looking for faults in beer and all those sorts of things. So,
that sounds fantastic. I'd love to get amongst that.
Adding value to our customers is a key piece of it.
I guess even what I sort of heard come out there is that your values are aligned with your clients, really.
Yep.
But then there's more to it. I can see that there's more to it in your answer there.
Well, it's certainly values, we're a very values-based business, so we tend to work with, whether it's people in our team or our suppliers or our customers or the drinkers, obviously, relate to our brand values. Otherwise, they wouldn't be our drinkers, they'd be drinking something else. The community, people in the community relate to what we do. So, there is a commonality around values, that's for sure.
Thinking back onto the what is a good venue, what I was trying to articulate wasn't that a business is profitable, or is it somewhere that the industry respects, or sometimes they're obviously the same thing. What I'm trying to articulate is sometimes the public believes that a venue is great when that venue really isn't that great within the industry.
Yep.
Is that venue a good venue to you if they represent the product well, they train the staff, and it sells?
Well, it depends on what you mean by not bad. What's negative about that venue, I guess, from the industry perspective? You're talking about it's not profitable, or it's not treating its staff well, or all those sorts of things.
No, not those things.
But I mean, if a venue's the current rave venue of the month,
yes,
then we either want to be there, but there's probably every supplier in town wants to be in a venue like that. We'll only be in there if it's on agreeable terms.
How do you tell whether a venue is going to be a venue of the month?
That's a crystal ball that everyone would love to have.
I'd love to know how you pick it.
I think what you do in this industry over years is you actually get to meet people who are starting a venue, building a venue, because normally, towards the end of the fit out or whatever, they're calling suppliers. And the way they, conduct themselves, the way they talk to their suppliers, what they're looking for the suppliers, or what they demand from your suppliers or whatever, their history, whether they've been in industry, have they not been in industry before, all those sort of things. You've got to make a judgment around the end of the day, the venues, what the people who are running it or own it are all about anyway. Sure, the fit out helps to some extent, but it's got to follow through with service and what have you.
Yes, thank you for that answer. It's one that I always think about, and no one really knows the answer. We just try to pick things.
Many a time we've walked away from new venue meetings and gone, okay, those guys, give them 6 months, or whatever, But sometimes we've got it wrong. I don't know. There was a venue in New Farm, the guy who came out of the finance game and started a beer bar, and we went, God, this guy's come out of, he knows nothing about hospo. Is he going to be good? Is he not going to be good? And we took a punt with him, and the venue went well, for a number of years. So sometimes you just can't pick it either.
A question that I just wanted to bring up, a question that we had from one of our listeners, Anna. She wants to ask what the structure is of the ownership of Stone and Wood, and then further than that, whether you'd be open to things like equity crowdfunding and things like that. Is that something that you guys have thought about?
Yeah, look, first of all, let's talk about the current ownership structure. So there's 4 founding families that were the initial investors in Stone and Wood. So Brad, Ross and myself, our families, and a 4th shareholder who is the local publican down here in Byron. And we all threw the same amount of money in the hat in the early days, put our houses on the line, and off we went, loaded ourselves up with debt with the banks, and away we went. We then brought Little Creatures in as a shareholder about 7 or 8 months into our journey. Basically, we were needing more cash. Not a huge amount more, but we needed more, and we thought at the time we can either keep putting more in ourselves or we can bring a strategic partner in. So I knew the guys from Little Creatures. I'd worked with them in the previous life of Matilda Bay back in the late 80s, early 90s. We thought those guys would recognise what we were building and be patient investors, understand that as brewers themselves, and at the time they had Lion as a shareholder, so we understood that they would know the power of having that arm's length relationship with a shareholder who was also a brewer. And so we brought them on. A number of years later, I think it was only 3 years later, Lion bought them completely. That gave us the opportunity to buy those shares back through a change of control clause in our shareholders agreement. We knew it was only a matter of time when they came in. So we were able to buy those shares back, and then we issued those shares back out to a fresh set of shareholders, about 30 individuals, for about 20% of the business. And that little capital raise, if you like, is what helped us fund our expansion into Murwillumbah. And then not long after that, we started on the employee share program we've got in place. So basically, after you've been with the business for 12 months, we do an annual share offer. So if you've been with the business for 12 months, as we make that first offer every year, you get a number of shares, or a dollar's amount of shares, and then every year after that, you get allocated more shares. And you don't have to put your hand in your pocket. It's quite a generous program. Basically, it's an interest-free loan, so they get to be a shareholder. They haven't had to pay for the shares. The dividends pay that loan back. And then if they leave the business, they sell those shares back to the business at what hopefully is a higher valuation than what they got them at. So it's building a nice little nest egg for our employees. And there's about 75% of our employees are now shareholders in the business through that program. So there's about 100 shareholders now in the business, and most of them are employed in the business. Yes,
it's a great program. And even off those loose figures, I mean, I imagine most people would be enrolling in that program after their 12 months anyway. So I'm guessing that it wouldn't be much more than 25% that have been with the business for less than 12 months.
Exactly. That's just because everyone. That's right. There's a whole bunch of people there that haven't been here long enough to earn them yet. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So hopefully over time, if we stop employing new people, we might get to a point where all 100% of them are employees. Are shareholders.
You mentioned there about working at Matilda Bay as well. I want to ask. There was obviously, and feel free to navigate this however you would like. Obviously, there was a situation where the Wild Yak came out with a Pacific Ale. How did you guys navigate that sort of scenario?
Oh yeah, look, we can go. That's sort of the trademark challenge we've had for probably the last 8 years. So I won't bore the listeners with that because I could be here for hours. Effectively, we have a trademark application for Pacific Ale that's been in place since 2011. And we're still trying to get that over the line. And aside to that was we had another brewer in Melbourne try and use the term Pacific Ale, and we took them to task over that. We went through a whole series of court situations. We lost that, so we're dealing with the aftermath of that now. But the trademark application still stands as we're here today. In terms of CUB being able to use the term Pacific Ale, they had a business called Pacific. Well, it wasn't actually then. There was a business called Pacific Beverages in Australia back in 2007, 2008, 2009, I think. That was a joint venture between Coke and SAB Miller.
Right.
And it was called Pacific Beverages. And it was basically the business brand name. It wasn't necessarily a consumer thing that people would have known about. When we applied for Pacific Ale, that was around, and the Trademarks Office sort of pushed back on us on that. But then SAB Miller decided they'd buy Foster's, and they got out of that joint venture, which meant Pacific Beverages was just disappeared as an entity. It just vaporised pretty much. So we thought we would then be able to grab that trademark once it was in non-use. Long short of it is basically we have had to come to an arrangement with CUB that would allow us both to use the word Pacific in beer. They had it with Pacific Beverages, we've had it with Pacific Ale, and they're able to use it for whatever they want as well, for Pacific, whether it be Pacific Radler or Pacific Ale Yak or whatever they've created. So we do share ownership of the term Pacific in beer.
Is it only, so does that trademark cover just you two, or can other people use Pacific?
At the moment it's an agreement between the two of us, our trademark for Pacific Ale was registered, it's been opposed, and we're fighting that opposition at the moment.
So what happens if it goes through? Is there some sort of backlog back to 2011, or is it from when the trademark goes through, if it goes through?
What do you mean backlog?
That there won't be, damages of some description.
Oh no. There's no damages between us and CUB. That's an agreement.
But outside of that, if someone else started a Pacific Ale.
It's basically that's up to a situation between us and the brewer. The other brewer in Melbourne, that was a passing off situation, and we're still working through that with them. But no, at the moment, no one else has used the term. It's basically been ourselves up until Wild Yak and this other brewer. All other brewers have gone off and, out of respect, I guess, called their beer Summer Ale or Tropical Ale or whatever.
How would you advise a new brewery, or maybe not a new brewery, but another brewery who wants to start their own title of a particular kind of beer, categorize their own kind of beer? Even we've seen the XPA, Bolter's done the XPA, and I've seen other XPAs come out, and then that there's no such thing as an XPA. People could have said the same thing about the Pacific Ale, and I wonder what's happening there.
I guess the difference is we applied for a trademark from day one when we rebranded to Pacific Ale, so it was very clear from our intention to create a trademark and brand around that. It wasn't necessarily a beer style call out. It was a beer brand, and that's the way we still treat it. Stone and Wood is our parent brand. Pacific Ale is our sub brand in the same way that Jasper Ale or Garden Ale or Green Coast is. That's the way we view it.
Yes.
Going back to your question around startup, try and find some clear air. But in this game, when you create something new, there is no style. There was no style for that type of beer that we created. That what we created was it was our own view of a beer. It had no style name. People used to ask us what style it was, and we're like, well, there's no particular style. So over time, it's a bit. I guess people try and jump on the bandwagon. That's fine,
Yes.
Success has 1,000 echoes, I think they say.
I've not heard that saying, but I should have, and I'm very glad that you introduced me to it. So even wrapping up that sort of topic on the crowdfunding, is that something that you guys are looking at doing?
Yeah, crowdfunding, we've looked at it over the years. Obviously, you only go down that road if you need cash. As I said, we're a profitable business. We have a big chunk of debt, but it's conservative in terms of normal business practice. We don't have a huge need for capital. It's funny. You've been to Moreland Bay, seen how much gear we've got up there and the thing we're building over in Byron here, but that's already set in place in terms of funding. Interest rates are pretty low at the moment, so debt's relatively cheap. And if you can service it well, then that's probably the first lever you would pull as a business. Equity crowdfunding has only been on the scene, proper equity crowdfunding in Australia for probably not even 12 months now, I don't think. I think it's something in time. We could look at it, but it wouldn't be really being done for sort of pure shareholder reasons. If you look at some of the other equity crowdfunding that's being done around the world, particularly in the beer space, it's more of a membership of a club. It's more of a connection with business as opposed to pure investment.
Are they doing that to create the community that you guys have already gone about creating?
Probably we're just going about it a different way. My view is, and we've done the same with our minority investors we brought in, and the same with our employees, is that you've got to treat shareholders with respect, and it's their money. When you accept capital from people, you want to make sure that you're going to give them a return on their investment, equity growth, and some liquidity so they can get out if necessary. And they're the important pieces, whereas reaching out and doing a crowdfunding thing and getting millions of pounds or dollars or whatever in the bank through thousands and thousands of people, they're never going to get a return on that investment probably, because if the business vaporises over time, we've seen that in New Zealand, a brewery went crowdfunding and then pretty much went into liquidation, or the business sells at some point or just ticks along as a private company, then there's no way to trade those shares, so your money's just stuck there. So for us, we would have to, once, like we try and do with everything, is how would we offer real value to those people if we ever went down the crowdfunding route? Because
a lot of what you guys do is based on the values and the community and your stakeholders.
Yeah.
So how, I mean, even walking through the brewery, you showed us that it is something that is incredibly strong, and that's something that's really driven a lot of Stone & Wood's growth. Because that's not just about staff, that's about every stakeholder across the board, from your customers to your investors. So it's great to see that that's what's really driven you guys.
I mean, it's value, so, as I said, our purpose statement is around adding value to all of our communities, and our communities are our team. So how do we add value to them? How do we add value to our suppliers? At the end of the day, we're very loyal to our suppliers. We rather work with them to create value for them and us as we grow, as opposed to trying to argy-bargy on getting the cheapest price. The amount of printers that I've turned away out of here over the years that could have quite easily undercut our current label printers, for example. But on principle, our guys provide great service, great quality, we think great product. At the end of the day, we're both getting value out of, so why change? The other piece is then our customers. So, and that's a big bit. We've always been strong on service. So as a small little brewer, from day one, we said we were going to be able to provide a service where people ring us one day, they get beer the next, regardless of where they are, if they're buying draft beer from us direct. And that's, that was when there was only three of us in the business. Our products provide good margin. We don't take the piss on price. So therefore that gives our customers the opportunity to make good margin on something that's turning over quite quickly. So it generates good margin and good value for our customers. As I said, we add value through education, staff training, support, all those sort of things from a customer viewpoint. Drinkers, experience, whether it be in the tasting room, at events, the products we deliver them, their online experience in terms of whether it's engaging with people on Untapped. We toast every check-in and on Untapped, and comment and engage with people. Some brewers don't even look at that. It's about adding value to them as much as we can, because at the end of the day, they're the ones putting their hand in their pocket. Yes. It's their cash. That's what's driving the whole piece. Our shareholders, making sure they've got that, return on investment, the equity growth and the liquidity. Our community, so the local community, that's wherever we're operating. So Coffs Harbour to Noosa, where it's a big focus for us from a local community viewpoint, but also outside of that, in London, for example, we do karma kegs and community activities over there. Yep. We have an ingrained foundation, so we've set up a not-for-profit foundation that for every 100 litres of beer we brew in a year, we put a dollar into that foundation as a direct donation that goes out into ground roots causes in the marketplace. We also run karma kegs throughout the year, which probably doubles that amount. We run a Festival of the Stone and an open day, which raise big funds for the community. So very much focus on adding value back to the community that supported us. And the last piece is the environment. We call it a community, but effectively it's part of us, and we try and minimise our footprint on the planet. Yes, and we also saw earlier your when we went and did the tour, how you treat waste as well, and that was incredibly interesting. I'd never seen it on that sort of scale before, even that breweries have had to do that. I've not seen that scale before myself, so it was incredibly interesting to see you guys doing reducing our inputs, whether it be water or raw materials, in terms of packaging materials, etc. Making sure we recycle and reuse wherever we can. Big solar panels on the roof of the brewery up there. Water recycling, you see, we're starting to look at in terms of using water from our treatment plant to clean tanks and
Yes.
hose down floors, etc. Yeah, lots of stuff we're doing in sustainability.
Incredibly interesting. There's another question we have from Jim O'Sullivan, who's asked about the tax on kegs has changed recently. Who is that going to affect? Is that affecting you guys, or who ultimately?
Really good
cops the
question.
brunt for that?
It's excise related, and excise is something that a lot of the small brewers have a bee in their bonnet over. They think we charge too much excise in Australia versus other markets, and it's retarding their growth, even though we're all growing rapidly from 50 breweries 10 years ago to 500 today, and growing market share. Excise, at the end of the day, the drinker pays the excise, not the brewer. This has always been our philosophy, and therefore we just collect it and pass it on to the ATO, and it does not even hit our P&L below the net revenue line. So it's money that comes in and goes straight back out again. So beer drinkers don't have a problem with it. We're still selling a lot of beer in Australia. Okay, there's decline in it, but that's more societal, I think, than value issues. Excise is, roughly in packaged beer about 20%. About 20% of the wholesale price of beer goes in excise. Over the years, when GST came in back in the year 2000, they dropped off the old state licence fee that licences used to pay, and they rolled that into excise. So it doubled the excise base on beer, and away they went. It goes up every 6 months, by the way. It's indexed to CPI, so you get an increase in it. But what it didn't recognise at the time was that the state licences around the country gave on-premise operators a freer hit on licence fee than off-premise operators.
Right.
On the basis that they employ more people, add value to the community, etc., etc. So the way after the hoteliers arced up about that, they reduced the excise on keg beer to a lower rate than packaged beer, to sort of give the on-premise operators sort of an advantage, if you like, from that issue around employing people, etc. So over the time we've had this difference in excise, and they drew the line at a keg of beer being 49.5 litres. So therefore anything under 49.5 litres was considered to be packaged beer.
Okay.
And you'd have to pay a higher rate. So if you put beer in a 50 litre keg and then put it in a 30 litre keg and sold it side by side, per litre, the 50 litre keg is going to be much cheaper. So brewers haven't gone down the road of using smaller kegs because of that reason, because the pricing would be out of kilter. The change in excise has been they've actually recognised that 49.5 litre barrier was silly, and they've dropped it to 8 litres, I believe. So all of a sudden there's no penalty now for putting beer in a small. It's not going to make it cheaper. It's just going to mean you're not paying more to put it in a smaller keg. So the advantages are, firstly, OH&S. You're not lugging around 65 kilograms of keg in your cellar, so that will be an advantage. Quality should be an advantage, because if you go to a smaller keg, you're going to be able to turn it over quicker. So smaller venues, or venues that have a hell of a lot of beers on tap, that aren't turning each of those beers over quick enough, using a smaller keg will actually improve the freshness and quality of the beer.
Yes.
So those two things I think are the bigger drivers. The excise obviously has been the barrier to that, so that opens the door for people to start using smaller kegs. Hopefully, quality improves and we have less workplace issues with people doing their back in a cold room.
Yes.
Lifting
So you think it's a good thing ultimately?
I think it's a good thing. Yeah. I mean, it's going to challenge people who have thousands and thousands of dollars tied up in their keg floats, or whatever. But I think over time it'll help. The other piece, it maybe give venues the opportunity to put more beers on tap.
Yes.
With a small cold room, you've only got a footprint of so big in terms of putting 50 litre kegs. If you come with a 20 litre keg that's smaller in diameter,
yes,
you can fit more beers per square metre in your cold room. So they might be able to offer a broader range of beers.
Well, that's definitely a positive outcome. Yeah. Could that mean possibly smaller batches from breweries?
Maybe. I think everyone's doing that now. I think we've got 500 breweries doing small batches now. I think the barrier at the moment is that some of those kegs sit around for a long time before they actually go through them.
Yeah. Okay, cool. The next question I'd like to ask you is around scalability and how we've talked a bit about the systems that you've put in place to build the business. How do you remain agile in your growth? How do you make sure that you're able to adapt quickly so that you can scale well?
Great question. I think years of corporate life taught the three of us that how you can put the lead shoes on a business through scale, and the bureaucracy that gets built around businesses that aren't focused on a purpose or aren't well disciplined. And therefore, when we built this business from day one, small, very agile, we were able to make moves pretty quick, and we've always tried to maintain that. And when we see those things start to pop up that would potentially slow things down, we tend to take the hammer out and knock them on the head pretty quick. Part of our culture is to recognise that there's, we still need to be nimble and adaptable at the end of the day. If you're building a long-term business, it's about being adaptable. That's the important piece. Yep.
Yes.
Move with the times. Part of our challenge has been, we probably haven't been as adaptable as we'd like to be, and that's been basically because we haven't been able to keep up with demand for Pacific Ale.
Yes.
So therefore, we've been trying to feed that machine, if you like, that Pacific Ale has become, which hasn't allowed a lot of capacity to do other things or take the time to build some of our other brands. And that's now probably something that we've got enough capacity that we're comfortable with that we'll start to look at doing.
Yes. There's a sweet spot there with capacity as well, because there's obviously demand for it, but if that demand is too high, people will be like, they'll get bored and they'll forget about it, go, I'll get something else. They lock into a contract with someone else. Or if it's too low, then obviously you can't, you're there and they're selling out, and if demand's too low, then you've got excess of product, which isn't the problem. So there's this sweet spot that you guys are obviously sitting in, where there are enough people demanding it that they're willing to wait that little bit. They're like, it's bummer.
Yeah,
okay, cool.
It's been a balance for us, and I guess what we've had to do over the years is obviously to try and meet the demand. We've had to do two things. First of all, we had to look at where we sell it. So that's making sure we put it in, as I said before, good venues where there is a demand, as opposed to selling it somewhere that it'll just sit in the fridge or sit in the cold room going nowhere. Geographically is the other thing, so making sure that we look after our backyard. Our markets outside of southeast Queensland, Northern Rivers, have probably been starved more than our backyard over the years, because at the end of the day, that's where our focus is our backyard. So trying to meet the demand locally has sometimes either been met by increasing our production capacity or winding back what we're giving to other markets. So trying to find that sweet spot is important, because in this game you don't want to invest a whole lot of capital in capacity that you can't use.
Yes.
And unfortunately what we're seeing probably the emergence of is, as the market is, we've got a lot of new entrants and guys building breweries probably bigger than they need.
Yeah.
We're going to go to an overcapacity situation potentially as a category. I think we've already got it as the big guys certainly have more capacity than they need, and they've been either putting people off or shutting plants over the last 25 years to cope with that. But at the smaller end of scale, we're seeing guys build breweries much bigger than they need, and the risk for me is you end up with people who will devalue the category.
Yes.
And at the end of the day, building powerful brands that can demand a premium and provide value for everybody is the way we see the strength of a market. If you got someone trying to just chump out litres of beer as a commodity and treat it as you want, sort of thing, whether it's a house brand for somebody or whatever, I don't think that builds any value in the category for anybody.
Getting into the latter end of the episode, I like to get into a more macro level again, away from the technical aspects of the industry specifically. So have that in mind with these next sort of few questions. I'd love to know what you're doing to explore, or what you're exploring at the moment, where you're looking to innovate and create. Where's your mind at with things that you're learning?
I think at the moment, where I spend a lot of my time is what is the world going to look like in 5 to 10 years' time?
Yes.
Because I think that's a lot of the thinking that we did well before we started this business was actually what was the world going to look like in 10 years' time, and we're here. And we've sort of been rolling those goalposts forward over the years, but I think with where we're at, particularly in our category, but even in consumerism in general, where's it all heading? So you've got to look at a number of trends, and I always sort of look at either parallel trends or trends that sort of have some similarity or theme to them, and if you project them forward, where's the intersecting lines in those trends?
Yes.
Because that's really where you sort of need to be. It's looking at industry structure, it's looking at consumers generally, and societal things like, stuff we've seen in the last few years, like Brexit, the Trump win in the US, some of the stuff that's going on here in politics, etc. There's this real retreat from globalisation or society back into your own little dung heap.
Yes.
And that's happening in all sorts of walks of life. And you sort of go, okay, there's something driving that. What does that mean for consumer brands and other businesses? Is that and the rise of local is a key part of that. Whether it be the farmers markets or the local coffee roaster or the local brewer or whatever. There's that whole focus around being close and cocooned almost in your own little community. I think that's one big trend that we've sort of got to keep an eye on. The other one is then what happens in that community and how people do engage. Because, what we're seeing obviously in big elements of the community, particularly the younger end of people, is this cocoon where there's a separation. It's almost the opposite of that retreat happening to a local community. Is they're actually withdrawing from community, engaging with people, being the sort of sole operators almost. Yeah. So how is that going to manifest itself over the next 5 to 10 years is also interesting. So we've got this almost self-indulgent element of the population that's going to grow.
Yes.
So those things are really important things to think about. In terms of products and that sort of stuff in our market, we've had this view for a while, is that at the end of the day, beer is, there's only so much you can actually innovate with beer. It's a pretty simple product at the end of the day. And you can push the boundaries and do some weird and wacky stuff and to try and differentiate yourself or, push the envelope and be a rock star doing it. But at the end of the day, it only gets you so far, particularly in Australia where we've got such a small market. There's only a small number of people who are excited by a weird and wacky beer that's totally out there. You might have a bit of fun doing it, but it's not actually, you can't commercialise that or scale it, to use your point. We think there's a retreat coming. It's like when, I don't know if you've heard me say this before, but when we first started putting our beers out there, we looked at the wine industry and saw that in wine, go back to the 70s, 80s, big gutsy red wines were what everyone wanted to make. And the reason for that was what they call it the Parkerisation of wine. So Parker, who was a wine critic in the US, used to score wines that were big, gutsy, Shirazes typically, very well. So all the winemakers decided, let's make big monster wines that are going to score well, because that's what will get us listings in restaurants, etc., etc. But over time, if you look at the wine industry, it's swung back. The evolution is swinging back to very much more the lighter, vibrant, elegant end of the market. Things like Pinot, Riesling, all those sort of things. Chardonnay getting away from that big, massive, buttery things they were to more leaner, Chablis style Chardonnays. Where we saw beer going was following a similar thing. It was big, massive, monstrous, hoppy, crazy out there beers, but over time people will swing back to something that's more approachable.
Yes. Sessionable and delicate,
So our view was, well, let's just start there. Let them have their adventure.
Yes.
We'll be here for them on the way through and here for them on the way back. So that's the sort of stuff that will, so for us, it's, that's where it got us to today. How does that manifest itself going forward? Well, we're still working through that.
Yes, there was some incredible insights in that whole answer as well. Something I've been thinking about is that pendulum swings, and this push and pull in society continues, and it'll continue to swing backwards and forwards. And it's how can you create a robust business that can work in all environments? And it's like building an organism. When you build a business, you build an organism that has to survive all of the curveballs, the trials and tribulations. It's really interesting hearing about how you guys have built Stone and Wood to become a business that does that.
Yeah, we're morphing from, a business that was built off the back of one thing, Pacific Ale, probably, the core of what we've been, still a big chunk of our volume. And but we've recognised that into the future, that one thing, may not be, sticking to one thing may not be the end game for us, because the world will evolve and change, flavours will evolve and change. So you've got to set yourself up for what's around the corner.
Oh, I can't remember whose method it was. I think it's a BCG method. I might be incorrect, but there's a BCG matrix, and you've got the star, the dog, the cash cow, and I can't remember the other one, the Shooting Star, I think it's called. There's the Star Dog, Cash Cow, and another one. And I guess
Bright Prospects.
That's it. So you've got your Stone and Wood is I believe your Pacific Ale is going to be your Cash Cow. I'm guessing is your main seller. And so that can then fund you into other things where you can dabble. You've got your testing as well, so you can be using that time to be testing where the market's going.
It's interesting. I was just reading about something about that whole BCG thing the other day, and I think they were actually sort of questioning the theory around it, because what it tends to do is drive business managers to come in and do that sort of analysis, and therefore go, right, okay, I'm not going to invest in this, I'm going to invest in that, or I'm going to carve that off and sell that, or I'm going to do this.
Yeah.
To try and get short-term shareholder return, people use that model for to just try and create short-term value, and that's what it was built for initially. But if you actually look at it and use it for, how do I make sure I'm setting myself up for the future? Then as you say, there's, I would say Pacific Ale and Stone and Wood is still our star. Spits off good cash, and we're probably at the stage where we can start looking at things like Fixation Brewing Company, Granite Belt Cider Company, and those sorts of things in areas that are in high growth. IPAs. We haven't had our massive big hoppy beers yet. We've had it in sort of the pointy end of the market, the love affair with hoppy beers, but the broader market really is only just starting to discover IPAs, I think. So we're going to see that grow. Cider's been through a massive bubble and burst a little bit, but it was not real cider. We've been through this whole sort of sweetened, fruited cider thing. But what's underlying in a cider market is regional artisanal ciders are still growing strongly, and that's all around the world. Yep. So that's why we decided no one was making cider really out of the Granite Belt. Yep. All those apples, the third biggest apple growing region in the country, were going to waste up there for eating.
Yes.
When you can make cider.
Exactly. Yeah.
Get a buzz out of it. So we think cider's still an opportunity for us. And we're investing in a little kombucha business. We think healthy drinks is something that's a space worth exploring.
Yes. What changes do you want to see take place in the industry?
First of all, I think the brewing industry, the small brewers, we've got to mature a little bit more. I think there's still some... we're seeing people behave in the brewing industry in a way that probably is risking it for everybody, whether it be through just the way the brand behaves or the way they do their advertising, or there's things there that sort of raise the heckles of the nana state people in terms of, if we've got to have a social license to operate as a brewing industry, and we need to make sure that everybody's doing the right thing in terms of how they behave and how they engage in society. So that's an important thing for me, is there's still a bit of maturity to go there, that we keep throwing fuel on the fire of the do-gooders out there. I think the other piece is, at the moment, we've seen with a number of mergers and acquisitions over the last, we've seen a lot of guys, a lot of businesses sell in the last 3 to 5 years. Yep. Another one this morning. What that's driven, I understand why people sell businesses. They're quite within their rights to build a business to sell it. But typically, if you look at the theme of a lot of those businesses, it goes back to your point around venues to some extent. They look on the outside like they've been successful, but underneath they're not profitable. They've been growing so fast, they can't fund their growth. They go to try and build a bigger brewery. The banks go, you're not making any money, I'm not going to loan you any money. Their investors are tired of tipping cash in because the business is burning cash, so they have no choice but to go, hey,
Are they approaching the larger businesses?
It's a bit of both there, probably.
Right, because
larger businesses are probably,
they probably know this and approach them and go, hey,
like those leopards or whatever in the wild that see an antelope with a weak leg. They're probably they're probably
they may
attuned
very
to
well.
that. The issue I have with it is, and it's not down to the guys who have sold, it's actually what's left behind in the industry, is that it creates this false sense that there's money to be made in the brewing industry by starting up and selling. Yes. And it's sort of an IT industry mindset where, top line focus, let's just jump in, grow the hell out of this thing, don't worry about making money, we'll just keep bringing investors in, and one day someone will take us out. Yeah,
it's very myopic, and it's like that short-term, hedonistic.
Well, unfortunately, what it does is it you end up with behaviour amongst these businesses that is very much top-line focused and not profitability focused. So it starts to change the game in terms of how you operate for the rest of the operators who are trying to be sustainable, profitable businesses, with these guys that come in with no concern for profit. It's all about just trying to move volume and get the revenue line up, so they can jump out. And that has a competitive impact across the industry. So that worries me, because it brings in false expectations from people too in terms of performance.
Because we've obviously seen those sorts of problems occur within businesses around, management. People have been upset with, like ridiculous sums for CEOs and whatnot across the world. And then there's a push to change that sort of structure. And then there's this crowdfunding or community-oriented system where you've got, employee share schemes and all these sorts of things to help really build within the business. But when it's an endemic problem within business, how can you get people to think longer term? How can you incentivize longer term thinking for business?
Yeah, well, I think that's happening. I talked before about the retreat from globalization to local. I think at the same time you're seeing a retreat from big global businesses to small personable businesses. People are tending to buy brands more from businesses they know, whether they're people they know in there, or it's something that they've learnt about and understood. I think we've seen, this massive globalisation creating these mega corporations, and I think society and consumers are going, hang on a second, I'm not sure whether that's exactly right for us. And and different set of values about, okay, I'm gonna look for a business that shares what I'm into. So I think there's more conscious consumers out there, and that's an important piece of the puzzle. It's not just from a product knowledge being conscious, it's actually about the type of businesses they like to engage with. It's only a small number of people today in terms of the total population, but it's growing very fast, and that's what's driving, one of the drivers of independent brewing in Australia, I think, is that there's the flavour, people looking for more flavour, there's the local piece, there's the conscious piece around wanting to be attached to the local community. I think they're all driving the independent piece. And there's that sort of pride around independent pioneering spirit. At the end of the day, if we didn't have small independent brewers, we'd still have two big guys with 90-something% of the market, and we'd be getting whatever they gave us. That's the way it used to be. And it wasn't until some guys got out there and actually started delivering flavour and other things, and connections with their local communities, all of a sudden people went, oh, why have I just been copping this for years? This is fantastic. This is what beers should be about, and it is what beer's about. Go back to the European village breweries, which I think community is. It's in breweries' DNAs. We tell the story to our new employees here. Quite strongly. Brewing started as a household chore. It was basically the woman of the house used to brew beer, just like she made the bread or whatever. And then in the Middle Ages, it became commercialised. The monks, actually the religious movements like the monks, started to provide it to the community, and then they worked out they could sell it and raise money for the community. So they commercialised it. And then you ended up with the village brewers. So all of a sudden, the village brewer was the hub of the brewery, hub of the village. You go to Germany now, we go there every year. We take our team of our people from there every year to go there, and it's the hub of the community. They're at the school fete, they're at the commerce club, they're at the sports club, they're doing all of those things, pouring beer there. The brewery's social hub of the village, and that's when I believe beer was at its most powerful, if you like. It was at one with the community, but then what had happened was, in most parts of the world, is it became commercialised to a point where it actually became industrialised, and we ended up with lots and lots of mergers and acquisitions that created these big corporations. And then they started commoditising it, just really sort of cranking out cheap beer, no differentiation, all those sorts of things. But we're going full circle. I think we're coming back to people understanding that actually we lost the beauty of what beer was about, which is the connection to people.
I remember reading something about it being German tradition that you drink the beer while you can still see the brewery. Is that, and that, I guess that sort of
No,
rings true in what you're saying there.
I guess that's a visualisation of the support for local.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a brewer we visit in Tettnang every year. We take our 5-year employees on a tour of Germany every year, and we go to a place in Tettnang, and Fritz is the current custodian of the brewery. His dad was Fritz, and his grandfather was Fritz, and his first born son is Fritz, and he'll inherit the brewery from his dad.
Yep.
So 7th generation, and they sell 90% of their beer within 23 kilometres of the brewery.
Wow. Yeah.
And they've been doing it for 7 generations, and it's just amazing to see that whole family business in operation over that time.
What's your creative process? So how do you get into a creative state and then generate an idea? So spark, it's a huge question. Spark an idea, entertain that idea, and then execute that idea.
I think, as I said before, there's lots of nerve ends, I guess, that you pick up on. I think you've got to be curious to be creative. That's my view anyway. And curiosity means not just taking an answer for an answer, but looking at what's behind that answer potentially, or delving into something deeper than probably someone who's sort of passing interest would have. All trying to find out more about the world or how it works. So I tend to have quite a broad dashboard in terms of the things that I sort of look at, whether it be daily, weekly or whatever. So having all those inputs and then trying to differentiate between what's a bigger, longer term trend out of all that versus something that someone's doing to react to something else, and trying to decipher the chaos out there in terms of the marketplace, and going, well, those things, I can see those things happening, but why are they happening? Not, so what if they are happening, so what? So it's exploring and being curious, and then trying to piece some of those things together to go, okay, so if we did, if you've got that fact, this fact, that trend, join them together, what does that mean for us? What should we be doing about that?
So that might resonate with some listeners being like, yeah, I can see all these things, but then how, maybe I can't, or how can I get myself into a state to see those things, right?
Lots of drugs.
Because I understand what you're saying, because
Yeah.
like my answer is that I know how to get myself into a creative state because I've practiced doing that. And your answer must just be very innate to you.
Yeah.
How would you describe you get into that cognitive state?
I think you've got to give yourself your brain space for a start. I think you've got to be pretty disciplined. I think being able to compartmentalise your brain is a pretty important part of it, I think. So parking the stuff that's getting in the way of giving yourself some freedom to think, I think is really important. Yeah, you've actually probably got to like a bit of solitude sometimes. It is hard. It is hard to be creative if you're surrounded by too many inputs too often and by too many people and what have you. So yeah, you have to try and find a quiet space to get to. Sometimes it's not healthy. I mean, you can't shut your brain off. Sometimes, you'll get that brain in a thought process mode. It could be 2 o'clock in the morning, you go, God, here I go. Yeah,
That's usually the time.
Sometimes you find yourself getting up and writing a note or something. So if you think you go back to sleep, you might have forgotten that little jam that you come up with.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that sort of stuff. Yeah.
Obviously, coming from a business background, I can see there's a lot of method, a lot of logic to the way that you move. But then I'm interested in the creative angle around how you play with the grey, how you dabble, how you is it very scientific in the way that you try things, that you go, this market is looking for this thing, or do you just go, look, there's passion behind this, let's just, if you're really incredibly passionate about this thing, let's start with that. If it resonates, let's go with a scientific approach.
Yeah, it's the old convergent thinking and divergent thinking. There's a lot of convergent thinking comes into spotting an opportunity or spotting a challenge or whatever in the marketplace or whatever. So you've got to be able to isolate the factors that aren't driving the actual thing. And then when you actually get to become divergent, you've got to go, okay, you've got to start developing ideas or thoughts around how to solve that. And you've got to have this very disciplined sort of approach where you're coming up with ideas, but also there's someone in the back of some part of the mind or some person in your team. It's whether it's if doing it individually or as a team, there's this come up with a whole bunch of ideas, but you also need the person there to go, hang on a second, it's a great idea, but just not going to help us solve this problem, or it's not going to help us address this opportunity. So you've got to have that sort of discipline around, filter out the ideas that aren't going to really actually
Yes.
hit the bullseye.
And that's kind of that. I think it's one of the first questions I asked this is where I was trying to go with it. Like, where do you know where the line is? How do you know where the line is? Where you cut off something or run with it?
I think you've got to be very clear about the strategy. So you've got to be able to take the 30,000 feet view of it whilst understanding the micro of it to actually be very crystal clear about what you're trying to do.
Yes.
Ideation will drive you off on a tangent a lot. So you sort of got to go, well, hang on a sec, come back in here. This is actually what I'm trying to do.
Yes.
Some people try and post-rationalise an idea to try and fit in.
Yeah.
But you can usually see that.
Yeah. But we can't ever have a completely vivid idea of what something is, what a concept is or will become, because it evolves as it grows. It's like knowing what adult a child will become. Right?
But I'm talking about the. There's got to be a reason for it being in the first place.
Yes.
So what's the reason for it being? You've got to be very crystal clear about that.
Yes.
What it becomes is something you can manage over time.
Right.
But you've got to be very crystal clear about why it exists in the first. Why does this idea exist at all?
Yes.
So that's the important piece. Once you then crystallise that and go, okay, yep, that idea fits perfectly with what we're trying to do here. Therefore, we'll build upon that and let it evolve, because what was the crystal idea once when you first start was very clear and understood, but over time it might shift. So you've got to be able to sort of shift with it.
And that's that staying agile and being adaptable. I love that. What's your biggest challenge right now?
No real challenge. I think my challenge at the moment is I'm actually, we're stepping back. We've got a managing director in at Stone & Wood, so I'm going through a sort of, pull back phase as a founder who's not active in the day-to-day, but sort of sitting across all of our businesses, trying to give those people that are leading those businesses the space to operate.
Yes.
And be there more as a mentor and add some guidance when necessary. So I think that's, part of that is letting go, and founders have this challenge, it's, something you created is your kids, as you said before, it's like raising a child. It is, we're going through a process with the team around how we transition out of that leadership role, if you like, to have other people step into that and understand that what that child becomes, we're either going to be very proud of or not so proud of. So it's being very clear about, what's going to make us proud and what's going to make us, want to disown it, so to speak.
Yes. My last question is, what is the next step for Jamie Cook?
The next step? Well, yes, probably putting more focus on growing the leaders in the business. For me, and probably taking another step back out of the day-to-day completely. That's where, I'm not a young man anymore, but I don't want to stop and retire either. My brain wouldn't let me do that. So being able to step back from the businesses we've created, but also add some value back in the industry. That's what I'm looking forward to do, is starting to work on some industry things and some local food groups and those sorts of things around here to keep me active in other ways.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for being on the show today, Jamie. It's been
worries.
amazing having you on.
Okay,
Thank you.
The show today was produced by Angus Brennan. If you'd like to know more about Hospopreneurs, for advice, insights, and extra content, find us at hospopreneurs.com. Thanks for listening.